Three takeaways. The first one is media can be used to empower and educate West Virginians to create a globally conscious narrative. The second is reclaiming our authentic narrative because we are the stories we tell ourselves. Third one, storytelling can be used to foster collaboration across the state. And then we try to think of things that we could do today, this week, based on those three things. In order to empower and educate West Virginians, we have to train and educate them on how to tell stories, or even if they're good storytellers, maybe they need to learn more about media literacy, learning about the power of media, understanding media's role in society, and that goes beyond learning how to spell. That's a bigger literacy issue that we have. We said that meeting and gathering in spaces like this, we were all media creators in a room for the first time ever, and we were all from West Virginia, all telling stories in West Virginia. We should be doing this more often on a regular basis. Getting into the community and finding those authentic voices. So if you're a reporter, don't sit at your desk, get out there and talk to people and find the stories that you seem to think you're missing. Use your own personal social media to tell stories that are authentic experiences. Engage with brain drainers. The brain drainers are the people that have left the state because they do care deeply about the future of this state and the stories we tell. Document solutions. So looking at, after tragedy, what's done to fill the void of what's happening there. So that's what we did.
Hi, this is the Blue Group. Blue Group, raise your hands. I am proud. One of our major takeaways is that the local story and the state/national story are very different on a lot of levels. A lot of us at the grassroots level or activist level are feeling more optimistic about West Virginia than any time in our lives. I'm one of those. But that's not really the narrative or really how we feel about a lot of what's going on at the state. And particularly official level, and that spills over and makes authorship very complex, and also makes who's trying to control or define what that story is. Another challenge is the capacity of media organizations is often shrinking, and we recognize that, and it's more difficult than it was 20 or 30 years ago to tell complex stories or get that local authentic voice. And the collaboration, some of what the last group talked about, could very much solve that. On the other hand, collaboration can build capacity, but vetting and building the trust in those relationships is very time consuming and is very complex, but it is also absolutely necessary, and that can be the path, but it's going to have to be done well to move us forward. And with that, articulating and implementing standards about what is an authentic voice, what is accurate, what is fair and balanced, what is getting at the complexity, needs to be developed across different levels, local, state, across different organizations, across different sectors. But that work is worth doing. And that might mean that a network like this could create a forum to talk about how that could happen, build relationships. We talked about maybe we need a yenta of collaboration that can help sort of match us and do a little bit of the vetting for us. So if we're committed to a process and some common standards, then somebody over here knows that they can actually trust. They'll have to build a relationship themselves, but there's a little bit of built-in trust if there is a network of us committed to some common standards, and that we really want to get at what the local story is and what the authentic voices are.
Awesome. Scott has ours. I guess he's going to hold them up or do something. So we thought one of the most important things, the first thing is we have to create a diverse network that involves as many people as possible, both thinking in terms of creators and media organizations and of audience. But if you create a network, then everyone can begin to work together and kind of navigate the new landscape as one organization or as one group working towards a common goal. Secondly, we thought that it was really important that if the audience has something to offer, we need to engage with them. We need to figure out what can you do, what time can you give us, what talents, what's expertise, what resources do you have, as we thought, and they just touched on about expats from the state. They have resources. We need to figure out how to go after them. People who love West Virginia who aren't here, we need to give them a route and a pathway to make things better. So that was our second point there. And then third, we thought that you have to be very deliberate about kind of what the mission of what you're doing is. So if you're going to change the narrative, or you're going to do something like that, you have to say that's what you're going to do. So we long said we're going to do something. We say we're going to grow Randolph. Public Broadcasting says we're telling West Virginia's story. I think that deliberateness is important, and I think everyone needs to consider that. You know, I remember growing up, my newspaper said something like, you know, serving the Tri-County area or something like that. And I think that was suitable then, but I think now we have to reevaluate those kind of mission statements and think about how we can become more mission-oriented. I think that covers us. We good, Purple? Anything else from the group? Take it away. I don't know.
I guess I don't know what
They used it's like under
Yeah.
mottos.
Representing the yellow, gold, use, chartreuse group. If I was in the room with you, please raise your hand. All right, I had suggested that Dave Mistich be the speaker up here, and somehow that got misconstrued, and the other Dave Emke, is up here. But anyway, in our group, we talked about the necessity to be authentic in your storytelling, and not just telling stories for the sake of filling up print space or for the sake of breaking up the time between commercials, but for having a good reason for what you're doing, understanding what that reason is, and specifically when you're collaborating with people, working together so you both know what that is, so you reach the correct, the end game that you both are hoping to get through your storytelling. And we also talked about engaging in the media community. Being willing to work together to collaborate to tell those stories. Being out there, not just with each other in our small little bubbles that we work in, but also out there in the community, going to the coffee shops, going to the wherever people hang out today, I guess, I don't know, but going out there and finding them, understanding where they hang out, why they hang out there, and telling their personal stories as best we can. Steps to do so: creating a space to come together face to face, such as this event here today, which was so wonderful. I think we all agreed on that, and I know that's been spoken about already, I think, by everyone else who's come up in here. Expanding that dialogue and continuing it as it goes to make sure that we don't become stagnant, that we know how things are changing, how the storytelling landscape is evolving, and making sure that we continue to do so along with it. And also learning from one another, both young and old. We talked a lot today about how there's a new way to tell stories. So there's also an old way to tell stories that's pretty good in its own right. So we can help them, they can help us. It's just it's a two-way street when we talk about things like that. Gold, yellow, chartreuse, puce. That was us.
All right, so we're yellow number 2. I'm kind of colorblind, so it's just color right here. Well, we were kind of all over the place, and we had a great discussion about various elements, but we definitely came out to find out, don't tell the story, but create the story. So we all have this unique story to tell, so let's actually create that and develop it. We talk about West Virginia, and you know, there's a thing with our situation right now. It's bankruptcy, and we hit rock bottom. But actually, that's a good thing. That means that equals a fresh start. So we're real excited about that. Connecting these dots with people that need assistance. So we do that through training. Using a community conversation piece that we can gather people from all over our communities that we work in, having a conversation, bring media outlets in, bring the community members, and actually what does the community want, what does the mass media want, and try to work together and actually develop that story. Repurposing content and actually sharing content. So we can figure out different mechanisms to utilize that. Along with the training aspects also, there's people out there don't even know what hashtags mean or what they actually, you know, they actually do. So actually just educating people on that and just all social media platforms and things of that nature. And make things positive, keep things positive, and amplify those good things, and tell those great stories.
Hi, we're yellow number 3. Color diversity. Okay. Anthony is our manager of flip charts. So what we talked about today, our takeaways, one is that there is definitely a multiplicity of narratives in West Virginia. And so I think when we're talking about, you know, we want to turn away from it, the narrative being always focused on poverty and coal, et cetera. Just what is that balance, and just having that critical dialogue and embracing where we are now in our history, but forging forward and revisioning for the future. So there's a difference between negative narratives and critical critique, and so being open to having those dialogues as folks report on the stories that are happening in our communities. We kind of wanted to flesh that out a little bit, and then taking individual ownership and acknowledging your own agency and filling in the story, and not only sharing your story once, but being open to continually and repetitively put it out there. So next steps, again, we wanted to really drive that point home, taking ownership of filling in story. Hosting meetings of the minds. I know a lot of folks have shared today how wonderful this experience was as community leaders and people who are really connected to storytelling. And so doing this more often, but not letting it end here, but creating action steps for not just talking about the things that we want to see changed in our communities and the things that we want to have be accomplished, but actually making to-do lists and holding each other accountable to go out and impart that good change. And then money is kind of something that we talked about too. It's finding that funding, and contributing that to a system of reporting and storytelling that's maybe not leveraged so much on who is writing a check, but the funding is diversified and plentiful so that we can have more storytellers and more reporters coming out into our community so that the abundance of storytelling is just really amplified for West Virginia. So.
Okay, so we were the blue or teal group. Teal, you're out there somewhere. So we did talk about, and I'm from Kentucky, so I kept having to say, we gotta talk about the whole region. It was not always successful. But we talked about narratives of the region and pretty much agreed that what people feel about the region, their narrative is very different than most of the national narratives, which are pretty negative. Although it does depend in a way what part of the region you're talking about, because for some people outside the region, like parts of West Virginia are seen as a beautiful tourist place and very positive. So it does vary. We talked about authorship and that there's so many new opportunities to tell stories in so many variety of ways and to work with communities working with journalists. And that we really do need to take control of the stories and be authoring them. And let's see, I think the steps we came up with, one thing was a suggestion of a listening tour to really look more at look both regionally and nationally, what are opinions of the region, and also what would people be interested in reading or watching or learning more about, both nationally and a regional level. We also talked about a great role for journalists would be to really research strategies for positive change that are working and report on that. And there's the desire to report really positive, happy solution stuff, and that's maybe not that journalistic, but that we can be looking for things that are going on both in this region and outside that would be applicable here, and that would be a good role for journalism. And then forget everything, the money, all that kind of thing, just commit and do it.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Okay, this is fantastic. As promised, we will get all of this written up and redistributed with everybody. Does anybody else in here want to add a thought at this moment? Everybody's pretty worn out? Yes.
Our group had a really great discussion on collaboration, and I think we made a really cool list that's still on the whiteboard in there, so you might want to take a picture with your phone or something. I thought it was really great, and I'm going to use some of the things we talked about later.
Cool, and we'll do that too, and we'll just include that as part of the package that goes out. And please leave your notes. Don't walk away with your notes because we need those to make sure we do this justice. Okay, I know everybody's really tired. Dean Reed, would you like to say a few closing remarks? And also, nobody has to leave. Please feel free to stay around and talk and network.
I also want to ask Jake. Is Jake here? Jake, do you want to come up and say a few closing remarks? He left that desk? Okay, so I just want to say thank you very much for engaging in this activity with us this afternoon. And I found it personally very useful in terms of just even beginning to develop our mission statement for our digital publication. But I hope that this is the beginning of a conversation, and really we are looking for partners. And so as this concept and as the actual work is happening, and it's going to happen pretty fast, we will be back in touch with many of you and ask you to engage with us. So thank you so much for coming to our space. Jake, would you like to say a few words in summary? Because this has been a fantastic event.
Just thank you, and to Marianne's point, we have everyone in this room, this sounds mercenary, is on an email list, right? And have all their email addresses. But how do we make that work, like, properly, to show value? Like, how do we show up, how do we follow up with you guys in a way that shows value? We were talking to Eric about sharing internship opportunities, right, for over once, and that's how we want to use this group. So I love your input on how we can use it to keep this crew together and to grow the crew, but in a way that doesn't look like spam from Jake, but that looks like value and energy and input and collaboration. So I need your ideas for that too. Thank you, drive safely, take tomorrow off, have a long weekend.